I am very excited. This is conversation one of the series, What Dr. Sue Johnson Would Want Us to Remember, conversations with Jim Thomas, ISEF trainer emeritus. This first topic, attachment distress is real. Attachment distress is real. Here comes conversation number one.
Welcome to the heart and soul of couples therapy. Conversations with EFT trainer emeritus Jim Thomas and EFT supervisor Ed Peterson. These conversations are grounded in strength-based emotional work and applied attachment theory. Jim and Ed offer this mix of interactional and experiential learning as a resource to encourage you on your relational therapy journey. Thanks for tuning in.
Hi, Jim.
Hey, friend.
Great to be with you.
Likewise.
Well, I am super excited, super stoked as we are creating some of the first episodes on our podcast, Jim, the heart and soul of couples therapy. I'm excited that we're going to be taking a deep dive into all things about couples therapy, attachment theory, what we've learned from emotionally focused therapy, etc. And so it's great to be here. And I know that we both have a lot of ideas about what we want to do. But you sent me a text this morning, Jim, and I really liked what you said in your text about a direction that we could go today. So
Yeah.
I'm going to turn that over to you.
Well, we lost our colleague. I lost a mentor and a dear friend of mine, and of so many, Sue, in April. And when she passed, I was flooded by so many memories of her, some very personal in that friendship, flooded by memories at times I got to talk to her in detail about EFT and by her impact, just the impact that she had on our field. And I want to talk about over our first episodes what Sue wants us to remember or would want us to remember, depending on your spiritual orientation. And I think it's important to remember Sue. We have a field that tends to forget people, maybe our lives. We forget people too quickly. And you and I wouldn't have a relationship most likely without Sue Johnson.
That's right.
Without the early trainers and her husband, John Douglas and Sue, that created the International Center for Excellence in Emotionally Focused Therapy. And if I hadn't seen Sue Johnson in 1998, I'm at an AMFT conference doing my president state division thing. And there's 3 workshops, Jim Alexander, Sue Johnson, Scott Hengler, and 2 of them are about family therapy. And I'm working at Denver Children's Home and I'm leading family therapy teams. And so I go into Jim Alexander's workshop. And unfortunately, if he were a functionally family therapy person is watching this, the mistake made was there was a 90-page handout. And I looked at the handout and I've been going back and forth between that and going to see this person talking about emotionally focused therapy, which was my post-grad work, was in emotion work. There was a mention of attachment theory, and I love John Bowlby. There was a mention of humanism and Rogers in the little blurb, and systems. That's a trifecta for me. So I took the 90-page handout and thought I could read that on the plane, and I turned around and I went to see Sue in 1998 and blown away.
Well, I'm glad you did. I don't think that you and I would be here today if you hadn't.
And then in 2002, I want Sue to come out and present for Colorado Association of Marriage and Family Therapy. We get it all scheduled, and she gets sick. She can't come, and Scott Woolley comes, knocks it out of the park, as Scott always does. And then in 2009, get Sue to come out, and our connection deepens. And the impact she has on all of us. And I was thinking, what's the one thing she most want us to remember of all the things that came into my mind? And it surprised me. And then I went to Patrice, my my partner and my wife, who helped out with so many workshops here in Colorado. And I said, what do you think? And she would say, the cycles are real and the attachment to stress is real. The attachment to stress is real. And I believe that's it. We have a tendency in our culture to intellectualize things, academize things, put things into academia, put things into a logical box, you know, and forget that what Sue was saying over and over and over again was when couples and families get into these cycles, the distress underlying it all below the surface is a very real lived experience. She said, people who seem perfectly sane and reasonable, but often become totally unglued with their partners.
Yeah.
You think about that, what can happen to us across cultures, across relational orientations, across, monogamous or open marriage or polyamory, gay, lesbian, bi, trans, questioning, gender. It's when we get into that distress with somebody that matters to us, we can become, like she said, so unglued or enraged, aggressive, catatonically mute. She would talk about how in her dissertation, when she's working on what's the best way to do couples therapy, these perfectly reasonable people in the waiting room become totally different in the office.
Right.
And she had that intuition that like just explaining things to people isn't going to make a difference. And then they taught her that. She talks about it in Hold Me Tight. She talks about it, in person and trainer meetings, that I would get them where they knew their cycle and they got a little better and then they go all away. But luckily her dissertation took a while and her clinical work in that program, they come back 3 months, 4 months, 5 months later, as big a mess as ever.
Right.
And she says to them, what is the most powerful moments in the therapy? And she asks all these couples and she gets the VCRs out. She says, Jim, that was a lot of work. I had to go. And it was all these vulnerable moments where they got below the distress, these vulnerable moments. So what does it mean to say Sue would want us to remember as relational therapists? She used to say we're scientists. Good therapists are scientists. We're making observations. We're looking for patterns and themes.
Yes.
Her biggest gift to us was the distress they're feeling is real. We have like Scott Woolley, I mentioned him, that brilliant, the cycle. And we can look at it and it starts to become a representation of something. And it starts to become abstract. And we forget that underneath where he says unmet attachment needs, there's also this attachment distress happening. Ouch, I feel rejected. Uh-oh, I feel abandoned. And it's like these two hearts they can't sync up and they're trying so hard. And what do they need? They need a therapist that'll come into the room and say, I see you. But here's the conundrum. What's the logical thing to do if you accept this? Let's say take a moment if you're listening, right? Your therapist. Think about distress in a close relationship you have. Can you feel what's going on with my partner or this person I'm just met, or what's going on with my best friend in this distress? What's going on with my sibling, my parent? And I can feel it. I feel maybe anxious. I feel scared. I feel mad. I feel pain. And it's true. Like we're recording this close to Thanksgiving. How many people will go to visit their family for Thanksgiving and say, I'm going to stay out of the cycle and make it to Wednesday afternoon, right? Before the cycle. Right. So what's the logical thing to do? Let's teach them. So what we want to do, it's like, I know that you're in attachment distress and it's the first session. So I want to say to both of you, good news. You're just in a cycle. It's attachment distress. It's really because you love each other. And does it mean they come back the next week better? No. Because the biggest gift Sue gave, if you watch over and over again in her work, is she goes towards the distress.
Yeah. 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 I want to just jump in with one thing. So many things that you just said, Jim, are just sparking ideas in my brain and in my heart here. Because I'm into my EFT training 7 years, 8 years now, and I still probably once a month watch a Sue tape.
Yeah.
I especially love a tape that she did with a couple of very reactive folks. It was a military couple that she worked with during a live. And just something you just said, I want to go back to you, but when you said that Sue would go toward the distress, right? I remember so much as I would watch her that her words were important, but even her body,
Mm.
thinking about this very reactive, sad, angry, pursuing
He's a
part.
Navy pilot.
Yeah, but it was,
Yeah. Trauma. He had
and
trauma.
it was the wife, and she
Oh,
was
right.
just all over the place and scared, and her voice was up and down, and she was just so reactive. And Sue would just come toward her, and just the way she would reflect and validate, and just her whole way of doing it looked like she was engaging with the person
That's right.
instead of sitting back there as a therapist and pointing out things and, like we say, talking about it. She wanted to get into it right here. Let me join this.
Right.
Curious about what this is right here.
Rhea, Matt and Rhea. Rhea, not Rhea. In 1998, this 3-hour presentation, she's showing their first training tape. And what I remember walking away with most was this female emotionally pursuer would escalate, and you'd hear her say Prue, 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 say her name, slow things down. And then she'd go towards the more emotionally withdrawn and make space for that withdrawn. Stay with. I see you even when you don't want to be seen. But I'm not labeling you. I'm not describing you. But sometimes when I'm supervising or mentoring, people would say, well, when do you tell them that you're the pursuer and you're the withdrawer? And I say, don't. Now they come in and let's say they've read Hold Me Tight. And they say, I think I'm an emotional withdrawer. I think I'm an emotional pursuer. And I'm in my heart saying, you're not a trait. These are styles. So Sue is also teaching us attachment distress is real, but these are attachment styles. Each of us have inside of us that range. There were times she's teaching us the attachment distress, there's a function. It's happening for a reason. Sometimes I'll say when I get closer to stage 2 and people are slowing down, but they're accessing fear. And I might say, Ed, when you have this fear that your partner will see you as not enough, can you look at her? Can you imagine looking at your life partner right now, your wife?
Sure.
Turn towards her, look towards her, picture her. And I say, remind me her first name.
My partner's name is Candace.
Candace, when you're scared that Candace might decide you're not enough and push you away, what does your fear say about what Candace means to you? It's an interesting question, isn't it? What does it mean that you're scared of Candace pushing you away?
Well, I'd like to say that I'm a tough, independent person that doesn't really need her validation, but if I'm honest, if I'm sensing that she's either maybe pushing me away or not listening to me or not seeing me, I go into a deep fear of what's wrong with the relationship, maybe what's wrong with me.
And that fear is orienting you to pay attention to what relationship?
With her. Yeah.
Because this relationship is so
Well, it's so important. It's so central, right?
right. And then I have to start wrestling with a part of me that wants to be independent and a part of me that needs this connection. And so Sue's telling us not only is the attachment distress real, but the attachment distress serves a function, an evolutionary like function to alert us. Something's off here in this really important relationship because if Candace or your neighbor isn't that important, you wouldn't have the level of fear and concern yet. So she takes us another level to that humanistic level, that survival level, and says, don't come in and judge them or tell them there's a problem because they're in attachment distress. Patrice echoed Sue without knowing it after we were doing this EFT beginners workshop and we all talking about the negative cycle. And she came out in the afternoon of day 2 and said, maybe everyone in the field should stop saying negative cycle. Say something like cycle of disconnection, distress cycle, necessary cycle, the cycle that comes with caring. She starts throwing these names out, and she's so right, right? Because when we teach people, you get into a negative cycle. Again, the intellectual presumption is if something's negative, you need to talk them out of it,
Right.
put a positive spin.
Well, right. You see, and to speak to this overarching idea here that attachment distress or relational distress is real. Even right there, I'll share you my experience as we did that very short little role play, and you had me actually think about my partner and ask me that question. And the thing about it, Jim, is maybe it's a cultural thing, but even being asked that question by you, what came up was, is there something wrong with me if I need her too much? Is there something wrong with me if I'm, because on my side, I tend to be a little anxious in our relationship. There must be something wrong with me that I'm so affected by her. How come I can't be tougher? How come I can't be more bulletproof? And so even in that moment, I feel that in my gut. And oh my goodness, that is distress, man.
It's real distress.
Real.
And that distress serves a purpose. It has meaning. It's to be explored. It's not, we don't rush through it. We keep coming back to it, and we go find Candace's distress, and we explore it. We explore the avoidance of the distress, the shutdown of the distress. If I go forward, Sue passes on. I say to Patrice, I don't want to watch a Zoom remembrance. If I get a personal invite to go to Victoria, or if they hold it in Ottawa, and then I find out it's going to be in Victoria, then I'll go. And so I went, and the last quote, this beautiful 70 minutes, where the most powerful thing I'd say if you're watching is how much Sue lived what she taught. When her son's husband says, I hope he won't mind, at the reception after, that I had a surgery, and they knew that I would be in pain and probably hurting and after the surgery. And I knew that my partner, my husband, was not the person that could tolerate seeing me in such distress. And I woke up to Sue saying, I got you, sweetie. I got you, sweetie. She lived that with her family. She lived that with her friends. She lived that with trainers like Leanne Campbell, when they moved to Victoria, there's Leanne, and they spent all this time together. And the very last quote, I won't get the quote exactly right. It was very movingly said. You can watch the remembrance online, is to know that at least one person cares about my terror. The terror that we can experience as a human or in relationships. And that one person will come towards me in my terror, feel it with me, hold my hand, to be with me. And maybe that's a message Sue is sending to us about being EFT therapists. Care about maybe their hurt first. Don't go rushing into the terror. Get to know them, ouches and uh-ohs, and then the sadness of the distance and the loneliness and the pains they experience, and put them in context. Like, what did you learn about whether it's okay to need someone? What's your culture say? Your religion, your ethnicity and stuff.
Right.
But how do we role play that? So I asked you to do a real play.
Well,
I asked you to think about Candace. So
exactly, and I know that we're going to go there, and I want you to tee up this role play. I think that's where we're going, right, Jim? But I just wanted to share that something that happened inside of me. I noticed myself holding back tears when you said that Sue was sitting with her son-in-law, I guess it was.
Yeah, but your son-in-law, yeah, her son's husband,
and that she was just there saying something like, I don't know, dear one or sweetie, or
I'm here, sweetie. Yeah.
I'm here.
The surgery was successful. I'm here. Yeah.
But this is the one that just hit me though, Jim. I've got you.
Yeah, I've got you.
I've got you. Because even as you started that role play with me, and I was starting to feel the distress of that has come up for me in my relationship. It's sort of like, wow, the idea that you, even right here, that the therapist, that someone is really seeing this and seeing the pain, because this negative cycle or this cycle of disconnection is making it very difficult for me to share that with my partner. That's not very safe, especially if we're in the early stages of disconnection. But to hear a therapist look me in the eyes and say, understand, reflect, and validate some hurt, and just maybe they don't say it, or maybe it's just implied that you, the therapist, that you are here for me
Right.
and that you're with me. You're not just observing, but you're with me.
Right. And that's so if we were maybe calling me on the phone or something and saying I'm in a really bad way with my partner, and I think it's the common call, it's communication difficulties and they're just stubborn and they're shut down, or you're in a session venting about that and it's a first session or a first phone call. Maybe, and maybe we can take turns doing this. Maybe in the next video you can be the therapist, but can you be the distressed oh my gosh, didn't turn my phone off. Turn your phones off, people, when you're going into sessions and stuff.
But also you're a human being, Jim. You don't get everything 100% right all the time.
I do, like now cell phones go out in the waiting area. I have a private waiting area so somebody can't nab them and
Right.
so
Yes. So I think I would rather be, let's have it be not me, because I
yeah.
will go a little too deep.
Yeah.
But you tell me what parts you'd like me to play, and I can be both. I
Can
can.
you be the most, what's the most sort of, somebody comes in and early on they're pulling for you to just go after the content and say, oh my gosh, your partner sounds horrible, or you're a mess, and just maybe we're early in a session and
Yeah,
do
I got
that.
it.
Before we get started, Jim, I need to say,
Yeah, got it. Okay, so I'm going to be me, and let's just say that I'm just talking about my partner. See, here's the thing, Jim. At the beginning of the session, here's what I need to say.
Hmm.
I love her, of course. She's great. But here's the thing. All she thinks about is her job. She
Her
comes
job.
home, she works long hours. She comes home. She's always wanted to talk about her job, her situation. I don't get a word in. And and then if I complain about something, or if I give her any feedback about something she doesn't like, then she's all over me. She
Mm.
can't take any feedback. And so what am I supposed to do here? It's like I
Can we
feel
pause just a moment?
sure.
Plus, you said so many important things, and I wanted you to know I do write these things down. Um, and as a sidebar to people watching, Sue wrote these things down. It was a great comfort to me. I've been a career-long note taker in session. I had one client once 25 years ago say, I don't like it. The rest don't mind. I lay my notes down where people can see them. I write them such that they can read them. Saw Sue do a brilliant at an externship, withdraw re-engagement. And when we were all processing, I said, could you read from your notes? It was all the emotional stuff, keywords, images. So, but let's go back. There's so much you've been saying, and I want to, and for these role plays, I'll call you Ed.
Yeah, great.
Unless maybe you're,
And you can call my partner Karen.
okay. There's so much what's happening with you and Karen, and you needed to tell me just as we sit down and we're just kind of for the first time going to be together in this marital, relational. I think you said, Karen, it's like a quagmire, and then you said it's on the phone when I talked to you. I had that it's like combat, don't feel heard. Um, Job. Karen's job is big and it's important and it's consuming, and Karen, you have an important job. It's a very common conflict amongst couples nowadays, right? This is your work's important to you. And I'd let Karen, I'm just getting to know her. Karen tells me about her work and how important it is. Ed's frowning. He's thinking, here he goes. He's getting sucked in.
I'm getting sucked in because here's the thing. Here's where it goes.
Let me
Like,
come back to you real quick. So, Karen, thank you for telling me about that. Your job, and her job requires long hours. and a lot of patience, it sounds like, on your part, and a lot of waiting, a lot of waiting. When is Karen going to be present? When's Karen going to be available? When can I talk? And you said something so powerful. You said, I can't get a word in.
Right.
And I can't get a word in. And then if I try to like lodge a complaint, and this is a common piece of advice you'll see on the internet, you need to voice your frustrations with your partner. She's all over me.
Right.
The other thing implied in what you were saying, it's really important. The job, the long hours, I can't get a word in. I try to get her attention through a complaint. She's all over me. That you're kind of teaching me that whatever's going on, there's some repetition, there's pattern.
Oh my goodness. Yeah. I mean, it shows up all the time, Jim. It's a broken freaking record.
And how just annoying, frustrating, miserable, uncomfortable, tiring is it to not be able to get the word, to get to kind of try to say, hey, look over here.
Yeah. And right. Because I don't mean to like, I'm not trying to tell her that she's a terrible person. I'm just trying to say, hey, how about, what about me here? What about, are you going to ask me about my job?
Mm-hmm.
Am
Your
I,
work's
am I,
important too.
yeah, and she works with, a lot of people. She works with a lot of men. Sometimes I just wonder how much does she think about me?
Right. What a powerful question. Can you just say that to Karen? Turn to her and just say, I wonder how often you think about me. Just tell her that. Real simple. I
Yeah.
wonder.
Yeah. I do.
I
I,
wonder.
I wonder how much you think about me, Karen.
And then pause, and tell me what it's like to just say that to her. And where do you want to go right now with that? So like to turn and say, I wonder how
It,
often
it,
you think
it,
about
it,
me.
it feels, it does not feel good.
No.
It feels like, well, I'm looking in her eyes and I'm wondering, like, am I just going to get judged here? And
Okay. Can you come back to me? Because I'm just getting to know you. And
sure.
thanks for that. Was good. So I will be kind of, this is a big tool I learned. I got a lot of this from my colleague Sue Johnson, but from another colleague, Suzanne Pope back in the day. I may pick words of yours like that and ask you to say them. And I appreciate that. Those were for your emotional record, you said, like, I wonder often she thinks about me. And then you get to experience the the something. I don't like that. I don't like that. I don't like wondering, right? It's sort of, is it agitating, annoying,
Yeah.
frustrating, painful?
It's agitating, but I think it's mostly, fear. And I hate saying that. I hate that word, but it's like, it's fear that this is the way it's always going to be. And,
Yeah.
and it's like this fear that she's okay with it. She's
So let's
okay.
pause
Yeah.
because we could go. I could role play with you on this for how long, right? Well, what's the main? What did I do with your distress? So if you're watching and you want to pause the tape, you could take notes. Like, what were the ways that this person was communicating indirectly to Karen because she's in the room and to me? I'm in distress here. I'm agitated. There's something off in this important relationship. Do you pause the tape and think on that? Right. And then if you now you're back, the your voice tone sounded agitated. You started right away. I need to talk. I get this out here, the job and the long hours, and I can't get a word in. And when I complain, she's all over me. And in that, I have enough. I just need to get the beginning of the outline of the underlying distress before I'm going to come in and intervene. A really thing that I learned before Sue from like the structural family therapy world in my post-grad training and working with families at Denver Children's Cell in my career, and then Sue just hammered it home, is we don't need Ed to unravel for 20 minutes about this.
Yeah.
And that politeness, I have to let Karen unravel for 20 minutes. So let's go back to the thing Sue wants us to know. It's attachment distress. It's
Yeah.
real. And if you don't titrate it, you would have just kept going and she would have come back at you and I'd be in that. What was it like for you when I'm slowing you down and saying,
Yeah.
oh,
Well, there are a lot of things that you did that were actually calming. They felt like um they definitely weren't making my distress work, and they were making me feel a little bit more safe. But I would say the first one, Jim, and this is something that I work with my supervisees a lot, and I've learned thanks to my wonderful supervisor, Debbie Gilmore, is that you quickly but lovingly interrupted at the very beginning, because I was giving you a laundry list of all the complaints and all the things. But the way that you said it, and this is something that I have learned from you and others, is you said, Ed, hold on just a second. And you said, you're saying so many important things. And then you said, I want to make sure that I capture them. And just that, to start out that way, one, it let me know that you were going to sort of be in charge of the setting. And I think in a way it felt good, because for me, this cycle feels discombobulated, right? It's like, oh,
mm,
there's someone in the room here who's going to guide us and is going to keep this room safe. And he said that these unhinged, in my mind, unhinged worries and complaints, that they're important.
so important.
So important. Just that just started off the session with me gaining some trust in you.
Did you mind me using your words? Job, long hours, not a word in, complain all over me. Or was it useful to hear your own words?
No, it was useful. It was, again, it felt like, yeah, I mean, I was kind of thinking to myself, is he going to make is he going to give me some judgment, or is he going to try to tell me what's going on here? But you repeated my words, and it felt honoring. It felt like, one, he's really listening, and second, that my words that kind of make sense, because Jim, when couples and when I'm in this role play, I feel a little like I'm a little crazy, like, whoa,
Mhm. Yeah.
right? And and using my words again, it helped me feel like I could stay in my seat.
Yeah, maybe I can piggyback on that just a little bit as a sidebar. If you're a therapist and you're wanting um, you're drawn towards attachment theory, a more vulnerable way of being with people, emotional focus, and you want to slow things down in your office and slow things down in yourself. Part of what it does for me is when I say, boy, I've gotten enough here, I'm going to lose track. I can feel my own, like, if I start to get caught in what Ed's saying, I'm going to get lost in it myself. And I pause and I say, and I mean that they're important things. I'm not reframing. No, I mean it. They're important things. And I repeat your words. Well, Sue was big on repeating words. Carl Rogers, the influence on Sue from that tradition was go read Rogers' transcripts. He's using a lot of client words, but he's not doing it in that rote parroting active listening thing we did for one class in grad school and then we moved on. It's a way of being with people because it slows my brain down. I'm tracking something, I'm reflecting it. I get to come into your experience a little bit, and it's keeping my limbic system and my emotional brain, my body, my vagus nerve, neuroception, all these things. I'm more likely to mirror a body language that's useful to you when I drop down in. So I don't do these just as techniques, which will be another one of what I think Sue wants us to remember. Another video is
Yeah.
how we show up matters.
Well, right. And I want to say one thing to that I think is so important, that I know has been critical in my development as a therapist. And that is that what I hear you saying, Jim, is that it's taking this distress seriously, and not, and it's like this. The way you used my own words, the way that you were gentle, the way that you were just the way that you were being, maybe it was a softness in your voice, it was a slower tempo. that I got this sense of just a little bit of relief because as I sat in this role play, I thought to myself, if I were really a person in that sitting and walking into a first session, I may not know it, but my fear really is that we're just going to fight. This isn't going to change. This is going to be more of the same. You know,
Mm.
what is this guy? We've probably read books on this, but there's something that you were doing with your voice and with your person and with your body that made me feel like this person is taking me seriously, and he's maybe it's that you're curious. Maybe that's the word, curiosity.
There we go. This is so we can tie a bow around this. That Sue would want us to remember, wants us to remember that the attachment to stress is real, and to have the curiosity of a caring person, the curiosity of a researcher, scientist, the curiosity of a caring human being, to be curious about how is this? What is the attachment significance of what I see in front of me? What is the positive intention in lodging the complaint? Where are the openings for me to come in and slow things down? Where can I reflect words and empathize and build my compassion that they come with? At the root, Sue's curiosity is what we're talking about. I actually have this where she says, um, as a beginning couples therapist, unsure of how to help these couples with the techniques many analysts and behaviorists and cognitive therapists were using at the time, she floundered, but she didn't give up. Rather than Sue becoming discouraged, she became fascinated with the quote, the dramatic, intricate, baffling dances that couples enact in my office. And where the other therapists backed away from that unpredictability, the conflicts, tried to teach them out of it, et cetera, bargain out of it, negotiate out of it, Sue's commitment deepened. Her desire to make a difference led to the study of the tapes, research studies, et cetera. And she said, I realized what should have been the most obvious truth of all. These relationships were primarily about the emotional responsiveness of each partner to the other, each family member, a thing we call love. It was about fundamental human bonds that reflect deep primal survival needs for secure, intimate connection to irreplaceable others. These needs went from cradle to grave, as Bowlby said. How had we ever decided that adults were somehow meant to be self-sufficient? And we go
Right.
back to the struggle with Candace, right? I think we're out of time where we could do this. We'll
Yeah.
come back and build on this in the next video. How's that sound? Closing thoughts?
Yeah. Let's just both maybe share couple things that are important to us, and then we'll make an exit here. For me, just a personal note, I was very touched, Jim, today when you texted me and said that you wanted to talk about Sue and about what Sue would want us to remember, what Sue wants us to know, because I do feel a deep connection to that wonderful woman who gave us so much. And even though I never met her, I feel like I carry her in my heart. Um, and then just speaking to what we did here in the role play, Jim, to me, what was happening was you very quickly became, or at least the beginning of a safe attachment figure for me. And I was upset, I was in distress. And by using my words, by telling me that what I was saying was important, and by telling me that you were going to write this stuff down, it felt honoring. It felt honoring for a person who's in a lot of distress and pain. And so those are probably my two takeaways.
Let me be specific if you're listening. That Sue wrote notes and I wrote notes is a lovely coincidence for me, and that we wrote similar notes is probably part of our collegial bond, and that helped maybe a person that could talk with Sue in a way where Sue once twice told me actually once in public, once in private. When you talk about EFT, Jim, I always learn something new. And it's lovely. But it doesn't mean you have to write notes. Right, that's just a thing we happen to do. So I don't want anybody going, oh my God, or I write the wrong notes. Sue would like it, write the notes you need to write, Sue would say in her lovely English accent. One of the moments when I was putting all this together, I'd learned to lean towards families that were working across cultural differences and things that never children saw them. I learned lean across gender identity, lean across economic, just how do you keep bridging and to connect. And I had a colleague, Jonathan, if he sees this, he'll remember for a while, he would bring couples to do this, like sort of lie. He said, I'll bring them for the afternoon and we'll do therapy together in your office. And we drive down from Fort Collins and this couple comes and one of the partners gets into real distress about an hour into saying, I need help. And suddenly this partner's just like, you're not listening. And starts wailing, help me fix this, help me before I lose them. And Jonathan calls me later and he said, wow, that was powerful. I leaned back in the chair. I looked up, and when I looked down, you had leaned forward and you were leaning towards and saying, I don't know right now how to help, but I won't leave you alone in this. I don't know right now. Those were smart words on my part. Those were Sue words.
Well, and you, by saying that, you're implying that you're employing curiosity, because if you think you know it all, why be curious?
Right. So we don't have to know. So if we go back, attachment to stress is real. It has primal evolutionary function. We're emotionally dependent. Then how we show up in the face of that distress, knowing that just top down explaining it will probably not be useful. Meet people, be curious, and remember that story that we can lean in before we know what to do.
Yeah.
We don't have to know what to do, but we can lean in and link.
Let's repeat that we can lean in before we know what to do.
All right, we'll go to another great one. I think we've got 4 or 5 of these of what Sue wants us to know to start our series, and I appreciate you shifting gears.
Well, it's a pleasure. I'm excited about this project, and I appreciate your time, Jim, and we'll see you on our next one.
Okay.
Thanks for tuning in to the Heart and Soul of Couples Therapy. Be sure to like and subscribe to catch all of our upcoming episodes. Jim Thomas operates the private practice Institute for Change in Lakewood, Colorado. You can contact him through his website at www.jimthomas.care or email at instituteforchange981@gmail.com. Ed Peterson and his partner Candace Peterson operate Peterson Family Therapy, based in the Salt Lake City area. Ed can be reached through his website at www.petersonfamilytherapy.com or email at peterson.ed.lcsw@gmail.com. All content is copyrighted and is intended for the use of mental health professionals and graduate students. Any use of this material without the express written consent of its owners is prohibited.